Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Today's portion of the tafsir which we will be covering inshallah, which the Qur'an will be reciting in Taraweeh. We've moved on to covering one juz every single day. So today's juz is the 12th juz, yesterday's with the 11th juz, finishing off Surah Yunus and moving on to Surah Hud. Now the end of Surah Yunus, yesterday we were slightly rushed to finish it off, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions a few ayat which we covered in very brief detail, and those ayat we mentioned that they are very concise in covering majority of the topics which come in Surah Yunus. The content of Surah Yunus is then sort of packaged up, as I mentioned yesterday, in those last few ayat. And the last ayah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَاتَّبِعْ مَا يُوحَى إِلَيْكَ, and follow that which has been revealed to you. وَاتَّبِعْ مَا يُوحَى إِلَيْكَ مِنْ رَبِّكَ وَاصْبِرْ حَتَّى يَحْكُمَ اللَّهُ, and then have sabr, persevere, حَتَّى يَحْكُمَ اللَّهُ, until Allah Azza wa Jal sorts out all of the affairs, until Allah Azza wa Jal decides everything. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is then giving this instruction to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, firstly as a source of comfort for him, and then and then for the rest of the ummah, and every single person who comes and reads the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that follow what has been revealed to you. This is the main purpose of Surah Yunus and all of the surahs that come after in the Makki surah, specifically Tawheed, Risalah and Akhirah, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believing in the Anbiya and believing in the Akhirah, and then we are expected to do sabr. Once we follow and once we submit, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to test us. أَمْ حَسِبْتُمْ أَن تَدْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةَ وَلَمَّا يَأْتِكُمْ مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ, that do you expect that you're going to just enter into Jannah without going through some trials, some tribulations? That which the people before you, they also experience some kind of trials. So we're going to go through some difficulties, and upon this we have to do sabr until Allah Azza wa Jal decides to take our souls and gather us one day on the final day. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala moves on to Surah Hud. Now Surah Hud is the name of Surah Hud, comes from the discussion or the mention of the Prophet Hud alayhi salam, which comes in the surah. Now he is not the only prophet that comes there. Many different anbiya are mentioned, and inshallah we're going to cover the different anbiya that come. But out of them, Hud alayhi salam is also mentioned there. Now the surah itself, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in the very famous hadith that شَيِّبَتْنِي هُودٌ وَأَخَوَاتُهَا, that Surah Hud and its sisters. So what are the sisters of Surah Hud? Surah Hud's sisters are the surahs that come immediately after. Surah Yusuf, Surah Ibrahim, Surah Ra'ad. There's a few surahs, there's a few other chapters that come immediately after, and they discuss in specific detail many of the stories of Anbiya and the different things that they went through. Now the stories of the Anbiya are mentioned, but also the very specific details of the trials and tribulations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't mention in a lot of detail all of their stories, but Allah mentions specifically about what they went through, their people saying things against them, and what they had to say in reply. Now why does Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say that shayyabatni, meaning Hud and its sisters have made me old? That is a literal meaning of the hadith. Why does he say this? He says this because many of the Anbiya that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent, they were given the bounty, they were given the very special honor of being made prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were given a message to take to their people. For someone being given that responsibility, it's a moment, it's something which is a very noble title. It's a very noble responsibility. A person feels elevated, a person feels very happy, and also a person feels that they are taking a message to their people which they hope that their people will listen. They hope that the people around them that they grew up with, many of the Anbiya, in fact every single Nabi only received revelation after a certain period of time. No Nabi was given revelation at a young age except for Isa alayhi salam. So every single Nabi was given revelation, and they would be given that revelation at a time when they are already established amongst the communities. So when they are taking this revelation to their people, and they are taking this message to their people, they feel or they hope that their people and the ones that love them, the ones that they've grew up with, the people that they played with as children and they grew up with, that they know very well, they hope that those people will listen to them, that they will attain salvation through them, that they've come with something. If a person is given something of huge benefit and that person wishes to share it with their community, their family and the people around them, they hope that those people will then take that from them and that they'll be a source of their people's salvation, they'll be a source of their people's comfort and ease. And so when these Anbiya went to their people, and their people rejected them, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions specifically in these surahs what those people said to them. The poisonous words, the venomous words of their people against the very Anbiya of Rasulullah, the very Anbiya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what they said back to them and how they said it and the way they rejected the Anbiya. That's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that these surahs have made my hair grow white. Shayyabatni, they've made me grow old. Why? Because of the way they rejected him. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also knows from these surahs, and this was revealed in Mecca, the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also understood from these surahs that if it happened to them, it's going to also happen to me. So there were many indications in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he knew that his life was going to be a life of great difficulty. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the very first ayah says, كِتَابٌ أُحْكِمَتْ آيَاتُهُ ثُمَّ فُصِّلَتْ مِنْ لَدُنْ حَكِيمٍ خَبِيرٍ. That this is a book wherein the ayat, the verses have been made concise, and then ثُمَّ فُصِّلَتْ, then they have been expanded upon, explained. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in this surah that this is a kitab where the ayat have been made concise first, where something is given as a small teaser, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals something in little detail, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expounds upon it in great detail. Now in Surah Yunus, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned or gave references to Anbiya. In Surah Hud, the next surah over, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up that explanation. This is the link between the two surahs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions something in small, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions something in brief. Then Allah Azza wa Jal reveals it. The Quran comes with it in a lot more detail. And this is something that we find across the Quran. This is one of the pedagogical principles, one of the educational principles of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reveal something in very small detail, and Allah will expand upon it in a great amount of detail. So for that person who wants to understand it and just take it away, it's there for them. And for that person who wishes to have a greater understanding of it, it's there for them as well. Finest example of that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed Tawheed in قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. This is Allah. Allah is independent. Allah does not beget, and nor was He begotten. Allah does not have children, nor is He the child of anyone or anything. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. There is no one like Him, there is no thing, no being, no entity, nothing like Him. That is the essence of Tawheed. Then that essence of Tawheed is expanded upon across the Quran. These ideas, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ مَلِكِ النَّاسِ, about shaitan and man's relationship with shaitan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that in very brief, then Allah mentions that in huge detail across the Quran in different places. So this is the habit of the Quran. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it such that it can apply to the person who is maybe they just want the very simplest explanation of something and they want to walk away with that and practice upon that. And Allah has also made the Quran such that it applies to people who want a great amount of detail, who want to go into the very depth of stuff, who want to know every single thing, and they're not satisfied until every kernel of curiosity within them has sprouted. So for those people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has also made it for them. Then Surah Hud opens up with 4 discussions. The first few ayat talk about 4 important things. One thing is that a person should worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worship Allah alone. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on about how only He has the unseen knowledge. Only He has knowledge of the unseen. Then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the different stories of Anbiya, which we're going to come later, those stories also reference this idea as well, that the Anbiya are telling their people that they should worship Allah only alone. Then there's also reference within the story of Lut alayhi salam and Ibrahim alayhi salam, who were great prophets, who were great Anbiya. Yet still, when angels came to them, they did not know that those angels, because they came in the form of men, they did not know they were angels until it was revealed to them. Meaning Anbiya, even the ulul azm, the highest stages or the highest level of Anbiya, the ones of the highest stature, even those Anbiya do not have any knowledge of the unseen except that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. Then the third discussion is that there should be no negligence in propagating the knowledge of wahi. That it doesn't matter which Nabi it is, doesn't matter who it is. Propagating the knowledge of that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given a person is a responsibility that they must fulfill. And it does not matter. Famously in the case of, which comes later on in Shu'aib alayhi salam's case, the people said, وَلَوْلَا رَحْتُكَ لَرَجَمْنَاكَ, we would have stoned you to death had it not been for the fact that your family would have taken revenge. Yet still, Shu'aib alayhi salam had to propagate the message. And famously also, the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it did not matter what the Meccans plotted and what they planned against him. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's responsibility was to propagate the message, and all of the Anbiya, it was their job to do so even or despite whatever their people said. And lastly, the fourth discussion is that the revelation and the explanation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given is very clear. The people have been given it, and that the people who reject it will only reject it because of their stubbornness. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala references that specifically in the discussion or the story of Nuh alayhi salam, which is the first story that comes. Out of all the Anbiya that are mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the story of Nuh alayhi salam, what he preached to them and what they said back to them. What they said back to him. As I mentioned, many of the discussions of the Anbiya here are specifically related to what they said to their people and what their people said specifically back to the Anbiya in question. So Nuh alayhi salam, when he comes and he preaches to his people, and he preaches to his people for 950 years, and he comes and tells them and explains to them, and he's trying to tell his people that follow what I'm trying to tell you. And one of the things that they said, فَقَالَ الْمَلَأُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ قَوْمِهِ مَا نَرَاكَ إِلَّا اتَّبَعَكَ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ هُمْ أَرَاذِلُنَا بَادِيَ الرَّأْيِ, that we do not see that the people from the people who disbelieved from his qawm, from his people, they came and they said back to him that we do not see anyone following you except those people. مَا نَرَاكَ اتَّبَعَكَ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ هُمْ أَرَاذِلُنَا, only those people seem to follow you who are the lowest of us. بَادِيَ الرَّأْيِ, those people who aren't particularly intelligent. Now, as I mentioned, the fourth discussion is that of those people who reject will only do so out of stubbornness. Now, this argument that they are making is not a logical argument. To say that only those people follow you who are the lowest amongst us and who seem to be not the most intelligent is not a specifically strong argument, because a person's validity or the validity of their message is not determined by the people who follow them. It's determined by the content of the message itself. And yet still, the reason they rejected Nuh alayhi salam was not because they felt that the content of his message was corrupt, that the content of his message was wrong. They rejected him because they did not want to be associated with those people who they considered to be the lowest. This is also in the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That famously, the ayah also mentions that why was this revelation not revealed to someone of the leaders of the two great tribes, meaning the tribe of Quraysh and the people of Ta'if? Why is it to Muhammad? And basically the premise of that argument, or what they are trying to say, is that had it been to one of the leaders, to Abu Jahl or Abu Sufyan or one of the leaders of Ta'if, then maybe we would have accepted it. But it came down to Muhammad. Now Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did have a lineage and a family to be proud of. He did have a particular standing within the community. He was known as As-Sadiq and Al-Amin. But yet still, he was not of that stature, meaning he was not of the leaders of the Quraysh. And because he was an orphan, as he had grown up, he lacked the family connection of having a father who could bring him into the society in the same way that some of the others of the leaders of society had. And so the point that they were trying to make was that because of his lowly status amongst us, meaning not particularly lowly in terms of the whole of society, but compared to the leaders, he was lowly. And also because of the fact that the lowly amongst us followed him, that's why we could not accept him. And this is something that we find within most of the stories of Anbiya, that one, those people will follow them. It's not particularly about their status or their wealth or their dignity or their standing in society, that means that they follow the Anbiya. Many a times it will be the lowliest of people that follow them. And one of the things that we learn from this one is, many a times we might look down at someone, we might think less of someone because of their outwardly appearance. But remember Allah, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْظُرُ إِلَى صُوَرِكُمْ وَأَجْسَادِكُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُمْ. Allah Azza wa Jal does not look at a person's face, nor does He look at their body, He doesn't look at their appearance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at their a'mal. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُمْ. Allah looks at our hearts for our intentions and our a'mal. In another hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions, رُبَّ أَشْعَثَ أَغْبَرْ لَوْ أَقْسَمَ عَلَى اللَّهِ لَأَبَرَّأَهُ. That there are many people who are disheveled, who seem to be in a bad state, meaning they look very bad, they look very by looking at them by their very appearance, it seems that they are lowly in society, it seems that they do not have much wealth. لَوْ أَقْسَمَ عَلَى اللَّهِ لَأَبَرَّأَهُ. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that if they made qasam on Allah, if they said, Wallahi, this is going to happen, لَأَبَرَّهُ, Allah would make it such that that promise would be fulfilled. Meaning their position in the eyes of Allah is such, despite their appearance being such that people will look down at them, people will think less of them. But if they made a qasam, their status in the eye of Allah is such that Allah would go out of His way to make sure that qasam is fulfilled. Meaning Allah would change things to make sure that qasam is fulfilled. Allah would move heavens and the earth to make sure that person's word is fulfilled. And this is, again, Allah does not look at the person's wealth, Allah looks at the person's heart. And this is something that we find in the life of all of the Anbiya. That the people that follow them were not particularly those people who would be considered or classed as the highest in society. Many a times it was the people who were the lowest in society. And this is something that we should really bear in mind. That sometimes we might look down at a person out of that pride and arrogance within us, but many a times that pride and arrogance can be a source of great downfall because that person, we do not know their status in the eye of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is a very important lesson to learn. And number two, the other important lesson is, if we are of noble status, if we have wealth, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us many things that Allah might have given us, many bounties that Allah has given us, we should make sure and ensure that wealth, that prosperity, that which Allah has given us does not mean something that is not a preclusion. It is not something that is a barrier from us accepting the truth. This cannot be a barrier from us accepting the truth. And what we find in the life of the Anbiya is many a times that it was a barrier. So to make sure that we do not do so, we need to take this lesson from the life of the Anbiya and make sure that our wealth does not distract us. Our prosperity does not distract us. Our standing in society, our responsibilities does not distract us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a very important lesson to take from this, from the life of the Anbiya, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'een. One of the ayahs that's mentioned here is, after all of the mention of the Anbiya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Nuh, Hud, Salih, Ibrahim, Lut alayhi salam, Shu'aib alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam. Specifically with Ibrahim and Lut alayhi salam, we will make reference to them later on, where their discussion with the angels comes later. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions when the angels came to them, specifically to Ibrahim alayhi salam to give him glad tidings of having a child, and to Lut alayhi salam to give him, to tell him or to inform him that his people were going to be destroyed. In both cases, the Rusul came, the angels came, and they came in the form of men, and they did not know. And again, this references back to the knowledge of the unseen. After all of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا تَكُ فِي شَكٍّ مِمَّا يَعْبُدُ هَؤُلَاء مَا يَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا كَمَا يَعْبُدُ آبَاؤُهُم مِّن قَبْلِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying specifically to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that do not be in doubt about what these people, meaning the mushrikeen of Mecca, what they worship. مَا يَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا كَمَا يَعْبُدُ آبَاؤُهُم مِّن قَبْلِ. They do not worship except that which their forefathers worshipped before them. Allah says this, one, to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam for the purpose of making him feel better. That لَا يَحْزُنْكَ الَّذِينَ يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْكُفْرِ. That, O Messenger, do not feel sad about these people that are racing towards kufr. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, don't be in doubt that these people are worshipping or they're worshipping. They're only worshipping because what? Because this is a source of comfort for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's number one. And number two, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making this point by referencing it to all of the stories of the Anbiya. He's saying to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that look at these stories. All of these people, all of these Anbiya, they came and they preached to their people. Many of them preached for much longer than you have preached, and for much longer than you will preach. And their people also rejected them. And many of their people, at the end of their life, at the end of the life of the Anbiya, they still had not accepted. And until the adhab of Allah came, they still did not accept. And the only reason these people did not accept was مَا يَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا كَمَا يَعْبُدُ هَؤُلَاء. They only worshipped that which their forefathers worshipped. They felt it difficult to leave the worship of their forefathers. They felt it difficult to leave the traditions and the customs of their forefathers for something new and for something that was only being propagated amongst what they considered to be the lowly amongst them. Now their forefathers, generally speaking, the people and our antecedents, we consider them above us, and beyond us, we consider them higher than us. So they would be higher than the lowliest of society today. So they would not leave something that was the habit and the custom and the tradition of those people they consider higher for that which was being propagated and disseminated and practiced by those who they consider to be lower. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is revealing this to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this again is a message for all of us here, that مَا يَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا كَمَا يَعْبُدُ هَؤُلَاء. The worship or the customs and the traditions of those people before us does not mean or does not give legitimacy. Islam is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed in the Quran. Islam is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has brought with him in the Sunnah. That is what Islam is. Our responsibility is to follow that. Our responsibility is, if it is such that others around us and others beyond us are doing something which is against the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it is our responsibility that we disassociate from that and we follow what Allah Azza wa Jal has revealed to us, and we follow what we have been told by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to do. Then from Surah Hud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala moves on to Surah Yusuf. Now Surah Yusuf is the very famous story which a whole series can be done on it itself, but this was revealed, Surah Yusuf was revealed after Amul Huzn, after the year of grief, where Khadija radiallahu anha, the partner of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the rock and the pillar of support of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, passed away. The mother of his children passed away. And also in that very same year, Abu Talib bin Abdul Muttalib also passed away. Abu Talib was the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who passed away as a non-Muslim, but Abu Talib was someone who supported Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was the one who was the barrier, who was the person who was the screen between the most violent attacks of the Quraysh and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yes, many things still came through. Yes, many things still affected Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Abu Talib, and because of his standing amongst the Quraysh, managed to protect his nephew from the worst and the most venomous of those attacks against him. So those two, the Khadija radiallahu anha and Abu Talib, they both passed away in this year. And in the year following, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was incredibly sad at their departure, at their passing. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed many different verses and different ayat. And one of those chapters Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed was the surah of Yusuf alayhi salam. And also another reference is made here that Surah Yusuf was revealed specifically after the Quraysh, to try to expose the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What they did was they sent an emissary, they sent a letter, they sent something to the Jews of Medina, asking them for something that this Prophet will not know. What question can we ask this Prophet of ours, this person who's claiming prophethood, that he will not know, and then we can expose him for being effectively a fraud? So they sent this message to the Jews of Medina, and the Jews of Medina sent a message back saying, specifically ask him, why did Yaqub alayhi salam and his sons migrate from Madian to Egypt? Why did Yaqub alayhi salam and his sons migrate from Madian to Egypt? Now, they were living in one place. Why did Yaqub alayhi salam move from Canaan to Egypt? From where he originally was why did Yaqub alayhi salam move, and his sons, why, and his entire family, why did they move from one place to Egypt? Now, in there is reference to the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, and upon this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the entire story of Yusuf alayhi salam. It's a beautiful story, it's an amazing story. And again, like I mentioned, there are many, many different sources and videos, books that a person can read and watch, and one should. And one of the best things that a person can do is take the translation of the Quran and read the entire story of Yusuf. It's very easy to read, and it flows all the way through. The entire story is mentioned, and a person can do that. And I would strongly recommend everyone, all of our listeners, inshallah, to do so. But we will inshallah go through in very vague form the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts off by mentioning the نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ, that we will reveal to you one of the most beautiful of stories. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by mentioning the dream of Yusuf alayhi salam. Now I mentioned, if one might remember, at the very beginning in Surah Baqarah and Ayat al-Kursi, we mentioned the ring composition. The ring composition comes back again in the life of Yusuf alayhi salam. The dream that comes at the beginning will be fulfilled at the end. The discussion between Yusuf alayhi salam and his son, Yaqub alayhi salam and his son Yusuf alayhi salam, comes at the beginning, and then their reunion comes right at the end. So the only time Yusuf alayhi salam and Yaqub alayhi salam are together and they are talking together, or they are meeting each other, comes immediately after the first dream, and immediately before Yusuf alayhi salam mentions the fulfillment of the dream. So and that same idea moves forward as well. So he had a dream, Yusuf alayhi salam had a dream where he saw 11 stars and the sun and the moon prostrating before him, and he told his father about this, and his father immediately realized that this means that the 11 stars were his sons, the sun and the moon were himself and his wife prostrating before Yusuf alayhi salam. And in that time, prostration was not an act of ibadah, was not an act of worship, it was an act of tahiyyah, an act of meeting someone when a person met, and also an act of respect and reverence. So he understood immediately. And he told Yusuf alayhi salam that don't tell your brothers about this. Now his brothers eventually found out, and this is where hasad or envy comes in. And hasad is one of the oldest sins from Habil and Qabil all the way till now and today, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends the Quran with the description of min sharri hasidin idha hasad, with the description of hasad. And the hasad of the brothers of Yusuf was natural, and is a natural inclination, and they, because of the hasad of the attention that Yaqub alayhi salam placed on his sons, they felt that why does our father not give us that same level of attention and love? Whereas we are older and we are stronger, and we fulfill many of the duties of the household, and they had this feeling, and eventually they plotted against Yusuf alayhi salam that they were going to take him and they were going to leave him in a well and make it out as such that he had been killed. And they come to their father and they say that we're going to take him out, and inshallah we're going to go out to play somewhere, so can we take him? Yaqub alayhi salam is initially hesitant, but at their insistence that we want to take him out, eventually he relents, and the sons all go out. And then they lower Yusuf alayhi salam into a well, and after lowering him into a well, they take his t-shirt and they smear it with blood, and they rip it slightly, and they go and give it back to Yaqub alayhi salam. And Yaqub alayhi salam immediately realizes what has happened. But he says that I am going to attribute everything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am not going to complain to anyone. Everything that I have, any problem, any issue, I attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And from that point on, Yaqub alayhi salam had a firm belief, had tawakkul in Allah, that he will be reunited with his son. Because he knew what had happened, and he had tawakkul in Allah. But he also realized what his sons had done, but he left it at that. And now Yusuf alayhi salam is in the well, he is stuck there, and eventually some people come along and they find him. And they decide to take him. وَشَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ. They take him and they decide that we're going to sell him in the market in Egypt, and that is how Yusuf alayhi salam reaches Egypt. Inshallah, we will continue from this tomorrow. The rest of the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, which, like I mentioned, is a very long story. We do not have enough time, and if our listeners, inshallah, would like to, there is much available which they can try to use or listen to or watch or read for the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. And like I mentioned, the best thing really is to open up the Quran and to read from there. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.